While you're watching SABC News live from Johannesburg, your headlines at this hour. 5 members of the Seti family who were gunned down near Beek in the Eastern Cape have been laid to rest today. While National Director of Public Prosecutions Advocate Shamila Batoyi is expected to review the decision to withdraw the charges against Zizi Kodwa and co-accused Johan McKay. The AA has predicted increase in the price of fuel this month, with petrol expected to rise between 14 and 25 cents a litre. Well, very good afternoon. If you've just tuned in, of course, you're watching the Week in Review with myself, Liesl Wilson. You can keep the conversation going with us during the next 2 hours. Perhaps interact with us, posing some of your own questions on our number in studio here, 011-714-0680 or 011-714-0681 or 0682. Right, so with those nitty-gritties out of the way, just after 12 o'clock, let's dive into those top stories. All right, so starting things off, on a somber note, 5 members of the Seti family who were gunned down at Nenjana village near Beek outside Mthatha in the Eastern Cape have been laid to rest today. An Aldi couple, a daughter and 2 grandchildren were gunned down by heavily armed assailants 2 weeks ago. Now, brutal mass killings are rife in the Beek area this week. A traditional leader, Nile Mthatha, as well as 80-year-old Nonceba Timakwe, were viciously murdered in their homes in Mklezeni village. We also saw 5 grade 12 learners, in fact, also being raped and robbed as well. So although they have not been linked, these incidences happened on the very same night. And so government has promised to intensify the crime-fighting efforts within the province, particularly in hotspots such as Beek and Lusikisiki. Meanwhile, National Director of Public Prosecutions Advocate Shamila Batoyi is expected to review the decision to withdraw the charges against Zizi Kodwa and co-accused Johan McKay. Now, the Directorate of Priority Crimes Investigation has written to Batoyi requesting review of the decision by the Director of Public Prosecutions, Andrew Chauke.
And the decision, Your Worship, is that the charges against both accused should then be withdrawn. As a result, the state is withdrawing the charges against both accused.
Following several postponements, the state prosecutor announced the withdrawal of the corruption charges against co-accused former Minister Zizi Kodwa and Johan McKay. Kodwa, who was visibly relieved upon hearing the news, expressed his gratitude towards his legal team and says throughout these few months he always prioritized the rule of law.
My representative, Mr. Machavu, read it quite very clear how much we went a great extent to cooperate with the law enforcement. It's very important. We must say that as a leadership, so that there's no impression that there's preferential treatment of anybody. I was saying to somebody, coming here on the first day, I was put inside the ox van, not because of my minister. I understood it, that anybody must go through that. And it's important to reaffirm those principles of equality, but nobody is above the law.
The National Prosecuting Authority says there are circumstances that change the prospects of a successful prosecution, and as such, it would be malicious for the prosecution to continue.
In deciding in this matter, he had to ensure that there is fairness, that there is transparency, and as well as the fact that the decision that he takes must be in the interest of justice, and also take into consideration the interest of society as well as the interest of the accused.
Kodwa says he is excited to resume his role amongst the ANC ranks. Zara Groenewald, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa says a new plan by the government to visit provinces will outline a clear path towards the improvement of service delivery. Ramaphosa, together with several cabinet ministers, have conducted a first meeting of its kind with members of the Limpopo Executive Council in Polokwane. Now, the meeting marks the beginning of a series of engagements between the president and the province to enhance intergovernmental coordination.
Following the establishment of the 7th administration under a new political environment, a new strategy has been devised by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Strategic engagements with provinces aimed at improving the quality of life for South Africans are now expected to be the norm. In Limpopo, Ramaphosa and cabinet ministers serving in the government of national unity met with members of the Provincial Executive Council. The aim of the engagement is to get a clearer plan of action from provinces going into the next 5 years.
Today is quite a significant day, as well as a historic day in many, many respects. Firstly, it marks the start of a program by the National Executive of our country to visit all the provinces of our country in the coming months and to engage directly with the provincial government leadership. Secondly, it is the first high-level bilateral engagement of this nature with provinces under the 7th administration and under the government of national unity. As we strive for greater alignment between the developmental priorities of the national and provincial governments, there is a need for all of us, right from the national executive, starting with the president, ministers, and all of us together with provincial government to engage.
Ramaphosa believes that by exchanging ideas between different spheres of government, solutions for socio-economic challenges can be realized.
As the presidency, we are also here to hear what must be done from our side to resolve bottlenecks and other challenges. We hope to be able to engage with you on how the ongoing structural reform processes, those that we are driving at national level through Operation Vulindlela, affects the areas of your work. This first engagement between the National Executive and the Limpopo Executive Council must in many ways set the tone and the agenda for future cooperation.
Limpopo faces numerous service delivery challenges such as acute water shortages and a high unemployment rate.
Your visit signifies a commitment to our province and a recognition of the vast potential that lies within our borders. However, despite these abundant resources and opportunities, we must acknowledge the challenges we face. Limpopo remains one of the poorest and the most rural province in our country.
The next bilateral meeting between the National Executive and provincial leaders is expected to take place in KwaZulu-Natal. Katlehonyeni, SABC News, Polokwane.
Well, other news not the South African motorists can expect some pressure at the fuel pumps this month, where, according to the Automobile Association, data from the Central Energy Fund shows that grades of fuel will increase in price. It's expected that 93 unleaded petrol will rise by 14 cents a litre, taking its inland price now to 20 Rand 80 cents a litre. 95 unleaded petrol is expected to rise by 25 cents a litre, taking the inland price to 21 Rand 30 cents a litre. While the price of illuminating paraffin is also expected to increase by 21 cents a litre. And despite these possible increments, these prices are still far lower than what consumers were having to pay at the beginning of the year. The Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources is expected to officially unveil the November prices effective from the 6th of November within the coming days. All right, welcome back. Let's continue now. Former South African President Thabo Mbeki has addressed the ANC foreign policy retreat that's currently underway in Kempton Park. The closed-door session is attended by the ANC's Subcommittee on International Relations. Now, the two-day session will be wrapped up tomorrow. Khayelihle Kumala, reporter, joins us for more on that. Kaya, good afternoon. Perhaps looking at what's emerged at this point, you could walk us through what's really come out of the retreat thus far.
Well, absolutely. Quite a very important session. As you know, that they often say that South Africa's voice does matter. As you know, that South Africa will be a G20 president in terms of the chairship, but also more often than not, there's always that issue around South Africa's issue when it comes to the foreign policy, when it comes to the peaceful resolution of the conflict. In fact, Ms. Mokonyane joins us now, the chair of the ANC International Relations Subcommittee. So once again, ma'am, thank you so much for your time. Let's talk about the significance of this meeting. We have conflicts, we have so many things happening at once, climate change, all of these geopolitical issues really unfolding before our eyes. Tell us about the importance of today.
Thank you very much, and good day to your viewers. We're here as the ANC's International Relations Subcommittee, joined by former ambassadors, experts in the international relations space, and the champion of foreign policy in the ANC, amongst many others. But the key one here today is Comrade Thabo Mbeki. The objective here is to reflect on our historical origin of foreign policy, based primarily on being an anti-imperialist political organization. Secondly, being very strong around Pan-Africanism, and that actually forming a base of everything that we do in terms of multilateral relations, on issues of international solidarity, on issues of governance, on issues of promoting party-to-party relations and people-to-people relationship. We now are looking at where we come from, the evolution of foreign policy, how it has actually been implemented over the past 30 years, and the new dynamics of climate change, the new dynamics of the geopolitical balance of forces, the new formations that have now come in these 30 years, and also the issues of peace and stability, looking amongst others the developments in terms of further economic transformation that is taking place in the continent, looking at issues of elections in the continent, as well as the establishment of new relationships and consolidation of existing relationships.
Ms. Mokonyane, as we're really speaking, we know that South Africa has been very vocal about the situation in the Middle East. We've seen South African government going to the ICJ. This past week we saw the memorial being presented before the ICJ to prove that a genocide is currently underway in Gaza and the escalation of hostilities in Lebanon. Just your reading of those dynamics.
We're quite delighted that South Africa has not only been alone. We now have almost 9 other countries that have joined us in this pursuance of confirmation that genocide is continuing, and it has spread its attack beyond Palestine as we speak, as you're referring to Lebanon and stuff. But of importance as well is to look at the impact of what is taking place there. There are resolutions that have been taken, but people are dying of starvation. There's no access to goods because of just the arrogance and unilateral undermining of the resolutions, and we also are looking at how best we work with the Palestinian comrades and friends in ensuring that we assist them in shaping the future, because as we deal with protest, as we deal with the exposure of the ills of Israel, we should also be saying unity is important. Let's develop your own plan, and let's all support you around that particular plan. So that's the work that we are dealing with. Not only are we talking about the issues of Palestine, there's work and intervention that is being made in Sudan. Very important, because even there you need to bring all the warring groups together and even appreciate the external influence and make the Sudanese themselves to understand that they may be fighting amongst one another, but the interests of this conflict are beyond the boundaries of Sudan. As we have seen also what is happening in East Africa and so forth. So the deliberations today is to also help the ANC to have a better understanding that whilst we believe in the recognition of democratically elected governments, we must have also an appreciation about the struggles that are now waged for economic independence, and give a proper meaning to that and work together with everybody who is involved in it. The inabilities and the challenges were reflecting also on the strength of our own institutions in Africa, the AU, its role, and how it gets undermined because of its lack of agility as well as how we work in strengthening the African Union, work together with all other nations that are part of, member states that are part of the African Union, but make the AU a body that is embracing and appreciating that developments in the continent require a different caliber of the African Union.
And Ms. Mokonyane, obviously another topical issue around the UN Security Council. We know that it's a hot issue for Africa, in line with Azulini consensus, to get those permanent seats. And the big issue is around the veto powers for Africa to be given those powers, as opposed to having a P5, having all those all-powerful privileges.
We still demand, and we still believe that it is a correct condition that we are putting, that the veto powers must not be a predeterminant of our participation. However, there shouldn't be a dominance. The developing nations must also be treated as the ones that are actually highly affected by the dominance of one or two against the other. And therefore, those that believe that they would represent us in pursuing our hard-won right of being represented in the United Nations Security Council, it can't just be for the sake of formality. We might as well not be part of the UN Security Council if we are not going to make any difference, because the NC itself has called for the reform of all these multilaterals, especially the United Nations Security Council.
Ms. Mokonyane, very interesting dynamics in the SADC region. We have seen a tsunami of elections. We have seen what they call a political earthquake in Botswana. The ANC's immediate reaction. One of the parties that is one of the key allies of the ANC, the BDP, your reaction to the developments in Gaborone?
Look, the people of Botswana in their entirety have been friends of the people of South Africa and the African National Congress in particular. Secondly, the BDP has been an ally of the African National Congress, and they will remain an ally of the African National Congress for all the historical reasons. But we also acknowledge that there are other formations, because of their own national dynamics, that are now finding themselves in other formations such as the Umbrella. And our view is that we need to appreciate the outcome and the peaceful processes that led to the announcement by the Chief Justice of the new president-elect of Botswana. It is something that we need to reflect on. Very soon we'll be having a meeting of the liberation movements, and this is but one of the items that will be considered. This was even not expected by the BDP as we spoke to them. They didn't expect, just as we didn't expect the 40%. Just as you didn't expect the 70% in Mozambique. So that wave is a wave that just does not need a PR response. It does need a proper reflection of whether these are the winds of progressive change or the winds of undermining and doing away with the rich history of the struggles of the people of this particular region. But of importance is to respect the will of the people.
Before I let you go, Ms. Mokonyane, post-election violence in Mozambique. We know that you were on the ground. Frelimo has won, but obviously we're still waiting for the Constitutional Council to validate the results. Just your message in the interest of peace in the SADC region. We know of the role that South Africa has played in terms of making sure that Cabo Delgado is safe in terms of repelling the terror attacks.
Even with Mozambique, we need to appreciate the people of Mozambique for having come out in those huge numbers to go out and vote. And we need to also be very skeptical about those who went to be observers in Mozambique with predetermined, expecting to have their own outcomes that they went into Mozambique with. That the will of the people in Mozambique has to be respected, as it has been respected in Botswana, as it should be respected in a few days to come in the United States of America. We must call on the people of Mozambique and urge them to resolve their issues by not actually going into the streets, but strengthening and improving the institutions of democracy.
All right, Ms. Mukunyane, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really reflecting on the significance of this day here in Kempton Park and talking about the role of the foreign policy for South Africa, the evolution for the past 30 years, Liesel. But of course, we do understand during the course of the afternoon as well, we're going to hear from former South African President Thabo Mbeki. Really just give us a sense about all these important developments in terms of the geopolitical shift, but also just reflecting on the role that can be done by foreign policy. We know that there's always a very unwavering emphasis around economic diplomacy. How can it really change the fortunes of South Africa? One of the dominant issues, but also looking at the global trends in so many aspects. So with that, back to you in studio.
Thanks, Kaya. We'll continue to monitor as those developments unfold. The ANC's foreign policy retreat currently underway in Kempton Park. As we leave that conversation there for now, we're going to take a quick ad break and continue with more news and updates upon our return. Stay tuned. Right, we continue with the weekend review now. The Carling Knockout quarterfinals gets underway today with matches between Cape Town City and Richards Bay FC. That's in Durban, and Kaizer Chiefs, in fact, and Mamelodi Sundowns. It's happening at the FNB Stadium. JMPD spokesperson Xolani Fihla joins us now to share a little information about the roads that will be affected in and around the FNB Stadium and Nasrec Expo. Xolani, good afternoon. Thanks for your time with the SABC at this hour. As we're speaking, edging closer to that kickoff happening around 6 o'clock tonight. Talk to us about the traffic currently. What are we anticipating as well?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. What I can say that it is one of the most highly anticipated cup games that we are having this weekend. It is going to cause significant traffic disruption, seeing that it is a sold-out affair. And of course, roads in and around the Nasrec precinct around FNB Stadium will be affected, and have also road closures in that area. Firstly, with the road closures, the Soweto Highway will then be closed off between the N1 Bridge and Main Street in Boysens. There's also another closure on Boysens Reserve Road in Boysens that's from Crownwood Road to Nasrec Road, and the road closures will be implemented at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Then officers, of course, will be monitoring all the other routes, especially Nasrec Road, Rancho Road. We've also got Golden Highway, and also on other routes around the stadium. But what is important is that we are appealing for people to come as early as possible to avoid any congestion before the game. But what we've also seen is that there's currently a serious accident that has happened on the M1 North, that's just after Boysens Road and Gold Reef City. And we know at the present moment, traffic is chock-a-block on both routes. That's the M1 North and the M1 South. And the M1 South is due to onlookers, and it might cause some significant traffic disruptions for spectators coming to the stadium, especially on the M1 South. So please be on the lookout for that. But our officers are on scene to ensure that they do clear it as soon as possible. And gates are opening at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the kickoff is at 1800, as you did allude. So we are, as I did say earlier, that we're appealing for people to come as soon as possible to avoid that congestion before the game.
Xolani, you really have broken it down there for us. You've spoken about the measures in place to control traffic volumes, incidences, road closures as well. I wonder, just as we perhaps also wrap up this convo, you've even given us advice on arriving early. Are there any road works that are some of the roads leading to the stadium or in and around?
There isn't any roadworks. We've ensured that our roads are clear, but on the Nasrec Road, that will be converted into 3 lanes going into the stadium before the game and 3 lanes going out to the stadium after the game, to ensure that we have at least enough lanes to take all this heavy traffic that we are expecting to be coming to the stadium. But what is great is that we do have a lot of parking space at the Nasrec Expo Center and also around the stadium. But additionally, Golden Highway and in the Nasrec precinct will be converted into a one-way, and that's to accommodate the participants who will be taking part in the Soweto Marathon tomorrow. They'll be picking up their race packs at the Expo Center this afternoon.
Oh, pertinent information coming through there. Thank you very much. Is it fair to ask you who you're supporting today?
Unfortunately, my team isn't playing today. they were knocked out of the cup for a couple of weeks ago. But all the best to the teams that are playing, and the spectators should keep in an orderly manner so that we do have a great experience today.
Well, Annie, thank you for your time, and thank you for just really outlining what our traffic is currently looking like, speaking to some of the road closures, the incidences, alternative routes as well, as we edge closer to that Carling knockout. Of course, the quarterfinals that's set to take place a little later on today around FNB Stadium. Xolani Fihla, JMPD spokesperson, joining us for that conversation. Another ad break is on the horizon. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. All right, welcome back. As we continue now, more news at this hour. Legal uncertainty over the recent issuing of Muslim marriage certificates in the absence of legislation continues to spark debate. Now, the Women's Legal Centre says that the Home Affairs Department cannot simply convert a marriage concluded under the Marriage Act into a Muslim marriage. As Mercedes Besant reports, Home Affairs recently announced that it granted the first batch of 33 Muslim marriage certificates for the first time in the history of South Africa.
It was an 8-year legal battle led by the Women Legal Centre before a landmark Constitutional Court judgment in June 2022, which affirmed the rights of women in Muslim marriages. Parliament had 24 months to develop new legislation or amend the Divorce and Marriages Acts to rectify the defects by June this year. Only the Divorce Act has been amended so far and was signed into law by the President in May this year. The Centre says the recent announcement by Home Affairs Minister Leon Schreiber on the issuing of Muslim marriage certificates falls short of the Constitutional Court order.
We are of the view that Parliament was undertaking the process to enacting new legislation altogether. The marriage bill obviously lapsed just before elections, and it was reintroduced with the new administration. So we are still in the process of that, and the Women's Legal Centre has been participating in the law reform process, giving comment, attending public hearings, giving input when necessary from a women's lived reality experience. So we were very surprised and obviously shocked to see that the minister is now saying that Muslim marriages are now recognized in South Africa. Yes, there is a court order from the Constitutional Court saying that Muslim marriages are recognized in South Africa. The Speaker of the National Assembly approached the Constitutional Court on an urgent basis in May this year, just before elections, because they would not be able to meet the deadline. So the Constitutional Court had given them 2 years, so it means that their deadline was until the end of June this year. But with elections and everything happening, then the Parliament then said that they won't have enough time. They're requesting for an extension. The Constitutional Court handed out judgment sometime in August this year, saying that it would be in the best interest to actually grant this request by the National Assembly because they were in the process, or something has been done. So now the Constitutional Court has then granted Parliament time until June 2026 to enact legislation.
The Women's Legal Centre says clarity on the power of the minister to issue certificates is crucial to avoid unforeseen legal consequences.
We just need to understand and understand on behalf of our clients and the women that walk into our law clinic every day with these queries. We need to understand which legal framework is the minister relying on, right? Because you have the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act for those who want to get married in terms of customary law. You have the Civil Marriage Act for those who want to be in civil marriages. You have the Civil Union Acts for the same-sex couples, right? So we now need to know which legal framework is it, and what powers does the minister actually have? So in our interpretation, with the first batch of certificates that were actually granted, we are of the view that it was couples who are Muslim couples, got married in terms of Muslim rights. However, they took it upon themselves to protect themselves and their property, right? And then registered their marriage in terms of the Marriage Act. They could have gotten either an antenuptial contract or gotten married in community of property. So it seems like those marriage certificates in terms of the Marriage Act are now just merely converted into Muslim. right? But we don't understand how, right? Because you then need to break down what the legal consequences will be. Because if someone is married in community of property, X, Y, Z follows. If someone is getting married out of community of property, X, Y, Z follows. So we need to be able to understand and also advise the women that walk into our doors to say that this is what this actually means.
Al-Jama leader Hanif Hendricks, who has been actively participating from a lawmaker's perspective, has a different take. His party says such interim relief is necessary using the customary marriage legislation, as was agreed with the former Home Affairs Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi.
Let me explain to you that there are 1,000 cases where women are in dispute because their husbands don't pay their maintenance, the husbands abuse them, they don't get the inheritance. So many women are winning their cases in the courts, and but the problem they have is they don't have a Muslim marriage certificate. So they've got to convince the courts that they are married. So now the issuing of Muslim marriage certificates, they don't have to convince the court that they are married in terms of the Sharia. You know, the Constitutional Court made a judgment that the Sharia marriage is a valid South African marriage. Secondly, the amendments to the Divorce Act gives a definition of what a Sharia marriage is. So that both of that helps the court. Then thirdly, the Department of Home Affairs now issues a Muslim marriage certificate using the legislative framework of the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. So,
and are you happy with that?
We are very happy with that because that is interim relief. So Muslims, when they get married in a mosque, they get a nikah certificate. That certificate is not recognized, has no legal consequences. So that means if one of them dies, the death certificate says never married. And that is an indignity. That means that children are illegitimate. It means that a woman are also, considered to be whores. So that indignity has now been removed by the minister and myself, working out, taking the necessary steps for a Muslim marriage certificate, because now the death certificate will say married, restoring the dignity of Muslim women. And they don't, when they now go to court, they produce a Muslim marriage certificate. It's a valid South African marriage because the Constitutional Court said so.
As the legal debate over the issuing of marriage certificates for Muslim couples continues, Parliament has less than 2 years left to finalize the Marriages Bill. The bill seeks to create one single marriage act that would apply to all marriages in South Africa. Mercedes Basend, SABC News, Parliament.
Right, more news making headlines this week. In fact, earlier this week, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana tabled his medium-term budget policy statement in Parliament that updated the government's expenditure targets for the next 3 years. This was the first midterm budget under the Government of National Unity. Our tax revenue for 2024-2025 is expected to be 22.3 billion rand lower than the February projection. Economic growth projections have also been lowered. 1.1%, of course, down from 1.3%. So perhaps to better analyze and make sense of these facts and figures at this hour, KPMG lead economist Frank Blackmore joins us via Teams. Frank, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for your time on the SABC at this hour.
Thank you and good afternoon.
So on the back of, the MTBPS having been delivered, would you agree that the minister's remarks earlier this week present a good or a sad picture of South Africa and her state of affairs? How would you weigh in?
I think the minister's speech was an honest assessment of where we're sitting. I think most citizens would realize that an economy growing at or below 1% is just not good enough for a developing economy like South Africa. We need to be making having a lot higher growth to make jobs and to include all those excluded from the economy. In order to do that, the National Development Plan says we should be growing closer to 5%. Even the initiative of government and business are targeting over 3% growth, and here we're sitting at 1%. So I think that is an honest appraisal of where we are. I think also it gave a positive message about where we want to go. So the main theme is basically creating that economic growth, but while consolidating the budget at the same time, because the more debt we have, the more debt we need to service, and the more money goes to paying back those loans and not to service delivery. So I thought it was a well-formatted budget.
Thank you for those sentiments. I'll delve in a little bit deeper on some of those points, but I just wanted to look at the medium-term strategic framework. Perhaps also, the ANC's stance was really to tackle triple threats of poverty, unemployment and inequality as well. And so if we look at the budget allocation or the adjustments they have this time around, I mean, what are you witnessing from here into as we've entered the 7th administration?
I think we've tried a number of policies in order to address that. I think when they came into power, I think all these issues were on the line. Unemployment, reduction in poverty, increasing the lives of all South Africans. And what has sort of aided in that manner has been the sort of social grant system that was established and now services close to 28 million people on an annual basis. We know that is not enough, and in a way, over the longer term, it would be an inadequate response to try and alleviate that the poverty, to be reliant on a grant system. What is far more sustainable for the economy and for the country would be to increase economic inclusion, allow people to be part of that economy and work in that economy, and we can see that policy change starting to happen in this budget of from the Government of National Unity. Without that economic growth, you just can't pull those folks in. You also can't increase the grant amounts. You can't invest in infrastructure because you just don't have enough money in order to do so. So it's a necessary condition. It's not an absolute condition. In other words, if we're growing economically, it doesn't mean all things will come right by themselves. There still need to be a lot of policy, correct policies in order to use that growth for the benefit of the citizens. But at least now that is front and foremost in this budgetary approach. And we're seeing it in a number of interventions. Operation Vulindlela has been pretty successful. The first phase, I think they had something like 35 reforms or mentioned tasks. These included things like the power, looking at logistics, starting to address that, data costs, water supply, and I mean bulk water supply, not in the municipalities, which most of us are still struggling with, and attracting critical skills. And we know with the e-visa system and a lot of the other initiatives, we haven't had load shedding, etc. And this is going on to now a phase 2, which addresses sort of other reforms necessary from a government perspective in the economy, things such as reversing local government's decline, because government services are provided at local government, at municipal level. That's normally who most of us are hold responsible for our basic services. Secondly, spatial inequalities, trying to sort out where people live and where people work. You either have to have a proper transport system linking the two, or you've got to integrate the two better. So that's on the cards. Digital government is going up to help increase service delivery to the poor. And then the other things that are just continuing from the first phase, restructuring of Eskom, starting a national transmission supply company, which will be important because that has to be the facilitator for the increase in a lot of the sustainable or renewable energy that we're seeing being invested in currently. And then also a lot of transport reforms continuing, including the private sector into a lot of these, the port facilities, rail facilities, etc. So I think we've done a lot, but there's a lot more to do.
Well, Frank, thank you for unpacking all of that, because I actually wanted to explore what investors would have been most worried about going into this MTBPS. How have their fears been allayed, but also the reactions then going forward from our ratings agencies as well. I'm asking this because if we look at the macro picture at large, according to Godongwana's International Outlook, worldwide commerce is likely to expand by average of about 3.3% annually. But this is obviously happening whilst global economic growth is expected to reach 3.2% in 2024 and 2025. So in layman's terms, I mean, unpack that for us. What does that mean in terms of our growth and trajectory?
So I think what he's saying is we're coming out of a very difficult period. So not we as South Africa, but we as the world are coming out of a difficult period. We were hit by COVID in 2020. People stopped spending. A lot of businesses had to shut down. And we know shipping routes were disrupted. As soon as we came out of that, we had Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. That gave a massive spike globally to inflation, which led to high interest rates around the globe. And that led to things like a cost of living crisis for a lot of citizens, also in South Africa and the rest of Africa as well, due to these high price increases. Now what the minister is saying is that we're going to see better economic growth in the forthcoming period as interest rates decrease behind decreasing inflation. That will put more money in people's pockets and businesses' pockets. We'll see more investment through business. We'll see more consumption expenditure through consumers. But it's not going to be an overnight panacea to the situation we're in, because we also have a lot of long-term issues, and I've referred to some of them: the electricity, the logistics issue, the public services issue, the local government issues that we all know are there, and they don't go away just because we're growing a little bit faster, let's say in South Africa. We need a prolonged period of good growth where we're doing the right things in order to alleviate ourselves. So investors would have looked and seen this budget in a balanced way. We increased our debt, we increased our deficit, which are always negatives from an investor point of view, because you're getting that sort of financial burden is building on the country, and it's less resources to be used for service delivery.
Yes.
But on the other hand, under closer inspection, they would have seen this one growth orientation of the budget, the fiscal consolidation that's continuing, which means that debt of the country is supposed to peak in next year's budget and then start decreasing, and the fact that we've actually experienced a surplus on our primary account. In other words, our expenditure, not including the interest expenditure on our debt, has been less than the revenues that we've got. So that's sort of all positive signs. So I think it was a balanced view, and we saw that in the market as well. Initially, the rand depreciated a lot, and then it came back later in the afternoon as people saw the detail and the sort of medium to longer term orientation of the budget.
Well, Frank, thank you for joining us at this hour and for really unpacking, making sense of those facts and figures, really how that impacts us going forward. Frank Blackmore is KPMG's lead economist, joining us this morning, unpacking, reviewing the medium-term budget policy statement that, of course, was delivered by our finance minister earlier this week. Let's leave that conversation there. We'll be right back after this. We continue here on the Weekend Review. Now, South Africa continues to navigate the fourth industrial revolution. The demand for skilled ICT professionals remains a pressing concern. The recent ITPSA ICT skills survey revealed alarming gaps in the industry, the cybersecurity as well as data science and artificial intelligence expertise topping the list of scarce skills. But it's not all. The report also uncovered a significant shift in hiring priorities, where in a surprising finding, more than 2/3 of employers surveyed stated that they now value soft skills more than traditional educational qualifications. And that's such as a degree, of course, when hiring the ICT talent. Traits like communication, teamwork, problem solving, and adaptability are increasingly prized over formal credentials. So this raises important questions about the relevance of our education system and how we really are preparing the next generation of our ICT professionals. So perhaps we'll share a little bit more on these findings, explore potential solutions as well. We're joined this afternoon by Hloni Mukunela, Managing Director of Africa Analysis SA. Welcome to this show, Hloni. Thanks for your time at the SABC at this hour.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Let's unpack. Let's delve in. The ITPSA survey painting a nuanced, complex picture of South Africa's ICT landscape, rather. And I wonder what the implications of the shift, towards a more soft skill approach is going to have. How can we also ensure that our education is equipping students and really creating that enabling environment for them to thrive on that front then?
Well, actually, Jim, just for a bit of background, I think some of the findings, I wouldn't say they are new per se. Okay. I think because of the approach that we've taken this year in doing the research, whereas in the past, it was focused predominantly on conducting online surveys, what we then also did was follow up with a couple of one-on-one in-depth discussions to sort of try to unpack some of the insights. What it revealed that, yes, we still prize having those technical skills that you can get from a tertiary and university or a college, but what it revealed is that is not sufficient. So I think the perception is that initially we thought, okay, all you needed was just a degree. But when enterprises or corporations are taking on some of these students, the claim, and I'm quoting, is that they're not work ready. What they're looking for is something on top of the skills that the students tend to already be equipped with. So they need to have problem-solving skills, because it's one thing having the technical skills. As a business owner, what you need is somebody to be able to solve problems for you. If they only have the technical skills, it can solve certain problems, but when you need people to take on certain responsibilities, run with projects, lead people, you need some of those softer skills to think on your feet, which is not something that is painted on your degree. So the intention is to now add on these other elements which are not necessarily provided from your typical degree.
And so, Hloni, on that note, how can government and the private sector and educational institutions as well come on board to collaborate and play their part, perhaps also looking at addressing the skill shortages within the ICT sector, particularly with cybersecurity and data science, even AI and that experience, that phenomena? Talk to us about the unearthings on that front as we navigate the path ahead.
Actually, that's a very interesting question. I mean, I think first you kind of have to take a step back and look at why is it important for us to be looking at equipping or at least trying to drive the ICT skills gap or digital skills gap. And obviously, people tend to use the two interchangeably. If you look at where the economy is going right now, you look at how intricate technology is, the role that it is playing in our daily lives, you quickly get to see how important it is becoming into our economy. I mean, you look at almost any growth plan of almost every country, and I mean developing and developed. There's some integration in there of digital transformation, and I think if you start to look, I mean, ICT as a sector itself it more lives in service of the rest of the sectors, but it is playing such an important role in transforming and enabling innovation in those sectors that you quickly start to see just how important it is. I mean, transport and logistics, retail, banking and finance, media and entertainment, to the extent that we now have what we call a digital economy. That's not just the ICT sector. You look at what Netflix is doing, you look at all the e-commerce platforms and all of that. They're becoming such an important part of our economy. They're also starting to play a role in the geopolitical landscape. I mean, you look at two of the leading economies in the world, the US and China, you start to see how it's playing a part in their interaction with each other. Now, as a country, it's important to be able to position ourselves in a way that we can play a role. We're not going to compete with China and the US, certainly not currently. But what we can do is, as a country, develop our own skills, our own ICT skills or digital skills to be able to compete on a global level. And one way to do that is to improve our digital skills. It attracts investment to the country. I mean, South Africa is one of the most advanced economy, certainly from a digital perspective in Africa. And what tends to happen when some of the leading global companies, whether it's, I mean, if you may even look back to companies like Microsoft coming into South Africa with Azure Cloud, you had Google, you have Alibaba, Oracle, all of them want to establish some kind of presence in Africa. Normally, the starting basin is South Africa. But what we need to do is meet that level of interest that's coming from them by developing a good base of skills. So when these companies come into Africa and want to establish a base, South Africa is the first point of call.
Yeah, but it's also about staying relevant with the necessary skills, reskilling, upskilling those who obviously are in the industry, and perhaps also future-proofing ICT talent at large. I know there's plenty more to echo around this. We have run out of time, so I'm going to leave the conversation there. But thank you for weighing in at this hour and really unpacking some of the positives emerging, but obviously also some of the gaps that remain as we navigate these uncharted waters. Again, leaving the conversation there, Managing Director of Africa Analysis, Africa Analysis, SA, Hloni Mugunela, joining us this morning, unpacking that report, of course, that had been issued, navigating the fourth industrial revolution as well. So we're going to leave that conversation there. It's but just before 1 o'clock, in fact, you are still watching the Weekend Review here on SABC News DSV channel 404. Do stay with us. We're going to continue with more news and updates at the top of the hour. We'll be right back. Well, you are watching SABC News live from Johannesburg. These are your headlines at this hour. President Cyril Ramaphosa has congratulated Botswana's President-elect Duma Boko following the Umbrella for Democratic Change's coalition of victory in the election. In international news, opinion polls show former President Donald Trump locked in a tight race with Vice President Kamala Harris 4 days before Election Day. 19 people in central Israel's Sharon region have been injured after 3 projectiles were launched from Lebanon into Israeli territory earlier this morning. Well, welcome. If you just tuned in, we're on the second hour of the Week in Review with myself, Liesl Wilson, here on SABC News DSV channel 404. You can interact with us on our various social media platforms. In fact, also keep the conversation going by calling us on our in-studio number 011714 0680 0682 as well as 0681. So on the back of that, let's delve straight into our top stories for this hour. Right, so starting things off, Gauteng Health MEC Nomantu Nkomo Ralioko has vowed to shut down non-compliant Spaza shops with the MEC led a food safety inspection blitz in Ekurhuleni on the Gauteng East Rand. The initiative comes amid escalating incidences of foodborne illnesses. It's due to food products bought from local Spaza shops. There are also growing concerns about some shops selling expired food, including unnamed manufacturers. Reporter Nonhlanhla Nchingila as well as videographer Thabo Mtsweni went along and compiled this report.
The Food Safety Blitz aims to educate Spaza shop owners about the importance of adhering to food safety standards in their business premises. At the first shop to be inspected, officials identified several violations.
So within 28 days, you'll be done with it?
I think before 28 days, I will make everything done.
And we hear that you also sleep here.
No, now I understand now is we can make is extra room somewhere and we can sleep there, we can sleep inside shop.
Despite the shocking state of the shop, the owner received a 28 days notice to address the violations. He was lucky that his shop was not closed down.
If you look at the staff shop, it's not in compliance with the health requirements because regarding the storage of the food and regarding the occupation, it is staying at the back of the premises. No occupation of the premises is allowed. You can't stay on the premises.
The Gauteng Health MEC has vowed to shut down non-compliant Spaza shops after some of the shops were found to be flouting the laws. Some were found selling expired goods, with the risk of foodborne illness to those who consume them. The MEC emphasized that closing non-compliant shops was unavoidable to protect the public's health.
We're closing this one because the team from the municipality that is responsible for that must definitely do that. We're going to confiscate the food that you find here that is expired, amasi, there is milk, there is fish, chips, there is some meat that is there, including the fish that we found that is in the Spaza shop. But again, some of the packaging that they've done, the food stuff, it's just right on the floor. And it's not supposed to be on the floor, it's supposed to be on the shelves.
Meanwhile, outraged residents of Duduza took advantage of the presence of the government officials at the local community center to vent their frustrations about being excluded from government-led projects.
Our demands is that councillors, they should hands off our tenders. The community needs to be engaged. There needs to be a proper way. Things that are supposed to be done in the community need to be done properly. The community needs to be involved.
The police officials are failing us because they have impact on these drugs being sold. Our children are dying every day because of the drugs. So we are tired as the community. We want the mayor to intervene. We are tired.
MEC Ngomorale Hoko says they now want to rope in officials from the Health Products Regulatory Authority because they have picked up that wrong medication is also sold at the local Spaza shops. Nonhlanhla Njingela for SABC News, Duduza.
Meanwhile, the parents of learners who've fallen ill after eating food suspected to be contaminated have called on the provincial government to take swift action. At least 55 learners from 3 schools in different parts of the province were rushed to healthcare facilities after consuming snacks and cool drinks that they bought at a local Spaza shop and street vendors as well. So in the latest case, 37 learners from Sinamuva Primary School in Pietermaritzburg were treated at a local clinic after eating lollipops.
A third case of suspected food poisoning in KwaZulu-Natal in as many days. Learners from Sinamuva Primary School in Imbali Township were rushed to Mbalenhle Clinic yesterday, complaining of stomach cramps and itchy skin. The learners are said to have eaten sweets they bought from a hawker. A source inside the school said that the learners complained of stomach aches and nausea, prompting the teachers to immediately rush them to a clinic nearby the school.
Shortly after consumption, the children fell ill and began vomiting. Thankfully, teachers notified the parents and the children received medical attention at the hospital. They have since recovered and returned to school. As concerned parents, we urge the police to intervene due to ongoing concerns about these Spaza shops selling expired food and potentially counterfeit products.
Following the incident, a group of learners is said to have attacked the hawkers, accusing them of selling expired food to the school children. Teachers intervened to calm the situation down.
Children running out from the classrooms and they were busy fighting with the aunties that are selling snacks outside of the school, as well as telling them that they shouldn't keep selling things that are wrong to them. So I think that maybe if there were tuck shops at the schools, tuck shops which were which the departments of health could be able to monitor and make sure that what they're selling is not expired or isn't harmful to the children.
Meanwhile, in Umthwalume on the KwaZulu-Natal South Coast, parents of learners from Bongucele Junior Secondary School want police and health officials to intervene. 7 learners at the school fell ill after consuming snacks from a local Spaza shop. The learners have since returned to school.
The girl that was discovered at the clinic that was pregnant, it's a matter of social development and police are handling that matter. but all the learners were treated yesterday, and they were all in good shape to attend school this morning. The second one, the Simunye school in Zululand, all 37 learners who drank a Kool-Aid yesterday were treated and discharged from hospital.
Several attempts to get comment from the Department of Health were unsuccessful. Lone Khatebe, SABC News, Pietermaritzburg.
Well, in other news making headlines this week, we're asking about how the exodus of senior EFF members will affect the party. That's the question that was put to experts at the 11-year-old organization head as it heads to its National People's Assembly. It's all happening later this year. It's expected that there will be no opposition to the party's leader, Julius Malema, but the conference will bring a new leadership that will, of course, take the party forward. So in a conversation with SABC, political expert Vusi Gumbi believes that as much as there is an exodus of leaders from the EFF, this can be overturned by the party conference.
FIFA, EFF, FIFA!
Since its inception, the EFF has undoubtedly proven to be a formidable force in the country's political landscape. The Red Berets was established over a decade ago, and after its establishment managed to be the third largest political party in the National Assembly, a position it enjoyed until it was toppled by the newly formed Umkhonto weSizwe party in the 2024 general elections. With just a few weeks before its much-anticipated Third National People's Assembly, the EFF has found itself on the back foot. The departure of its senior leadership, amongst them founding member and Deputy President Floyd Shivambu, who played a pivotal role in the trajectory of the organization.
I will join and participate in Umkhonto weSizwe party.
Shivambu's departure was not the only one. Mzwanele Manye and recently former public protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane have also jumped ship to join MK party.
Since Floyd left, I've seen so many parading of people on the social media.
Now, as the party is gearing up for its elective conference in December, how is the exodus of leadership affecting the party?
Politics is not only about reality. Politics is about a perception of force to the public, right? So that's what people need to understand. Politics is about the perception of force and dominance in the public. How do you appear? How do people perceive you? Right now, people perceive the EFF to be vulnerable. One, they dropped. And even though they dropped by just over 1%, for the EFF it was unexpected because they are one of those few political parties that were growing since inception. Two, they lose Floyd Shivambu to a growing MK political party that is sowing divisions not only the EFF but the ANC as well. So from a public point of view or from a perception point of view, the EFF is a bleeding political party.
With interest growing on the state of the party, one thing is certain that the man at the helm, Party President Julius Malema, has in his right proven to have more than one life when it comes to politics. Another question that lingers in many people's mind is that, is this the beginning of the end for the Red Beret, or just a hiccup that will not hinder the party, especially with local government elections fast approaching? Political analyst Vusi Gumbi says all is not lost for the EFF, as the party can use its upcoming conference to regain momentum in the political landscape of the country.
For them, it's how do you make the NPA make a political statement, right? So that is what, so the NPA is not only going to be about policy documents and electing leadership. It's going to be how does the EFF make a political statement using their conference, similar to how they made a political statement at their 10th anniversary rally, where they filled FNB Stadium to the tatters.
As the EFF members gather in Nasrec to take stock of the challenges of the party during the December conference, another issue that lingers is the jostling for position that Floyd Shivambu left, with names of Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi and Godrich Gadi being thrown around.
This organization will never die. This organization will never die.
Ntantla Khatlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, we continue here with the week in review. Other news now, Johannesburg Human Settlements MMC Mlungisi Mabaso says he will approach the court to seek an eviction order to remove over 20 people illegally residing at the Nancy Field Old Age Home in Eldorado Park, just south of Johannesburg. Mabaso visited the home on Friday, following reports of people who've been living there for years, even though they don't qualify. He says that they're also concerned about break-ins at the facility, which is endangering the lives of the elderly as well.
Unsafe and insecure. Residents at this old age home worry about their safety. They say the break-ins at the facility are endangering their lives. Residents say visitors walk in and out of the facility as they please.
Crime is very high, day and night. There was a break-in 2 months ago, down there on the other side of the units, and nothing was done. The police came, they wrote statements, and we're still waiting for the outcome, which didn't happen. With MMC visiting us today, I hope for a better living, a change, especially with the children and the grandchildren, and the in and out at the entrance at the gate, because every Tom, Dick, and Harry walks into that gate. We've got security, but it's not that tight to stop the other illegal people. They just come as they like and they go as they please.
The issue of illegal occupants has been at the center of the old age home. Another resident living with her son says they have applied for RDP housing, yet they still have not been allocated one.
In the beginning, we stayed with my dad. We came here through him. We stayed here. But afterwards, we discovered we applied for an RDP house. We haven't been allocated an RDP house as yet. And we're still waiting for this RDP house. We don't have any way to go to. My son stays with me because I'm his parent. And he's got no family, he's got no one that he can go to and go and stay or whatever. That's the reason why we are stuck here in this village, because we applied in 1996 for an RDP house. We haven't been allocated the house yet.
Concerns have been raised that children live at the retirement home. Joyce Epleman, who has lived at the retirement home for 13 years, lives with her grandchildren. She says they have nowhere to go. She says, I really love those children because their mother smokes drugs. She doesn't care about them and I'm with them all the time because I get worried when the children leave and I ask myself, where are they going? Where are they going to stay? The department says measures will be put in place to ensure the safety of citizens at the old age home.
We are looking into installing an electric fence for us to protect the wall that we had already constructed. We are looking at installing a guard house at the back and adding a security personnel so that they are able to patrol the area. We are also looking into activating the biometric system so that we control the access into the property. We are also looking into approaching the court, petitioning the court for us to obtain eviction orders to evict those 21 illegal occupants that are here. There are children here in a way and that are residing here with certain senior citizens.
Monique Lewis, SABC News, Eldorado Park.
Right, let's continue now. In legal matters, the Judicial Service Commission's Conduct Committee has recommended that former Chief Justice Mogoeng face an impeachment inquiry. This comes over dishonesty claims made against him by impeached Judge John Hlophe. Now, the former Western Cape Judge President has accused Mogoeng of violating his oath of office by having a private meeting with then Deputy Judge President Patricia Goliath. Hlophe alleges that Mogoeng encouraged his then Deputy Goliath to file a complaint against him. So perhaps to unpack this further, we're joined via Zoom, in fact, by Mpumelelo Zigalala, a legal expert. Mpumelelo, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on the SABC at this hour.
Good afternoon to you, and also good afternoon to your viewers.
Let's make sense of what's emerged this week. What in fact do you make of this complaint of gross judicial misconduct against Mogoeng? Perhaps also the timing of all of this.
I think maybe it's important for us to start and check how these two institutions actually work. So there's a complaint that will be filed. Let's call that the initial investigation that should be done. So then the conduct committee will come back and say, yes, there is something that we should listen to. Please give us permission to start the actual hearings so that evidence can then be led. After evidence has been led, it then goes back to the JSC. The JSC decides upon it before it sends it to Parliament, before it goes to the President, for the President to decide whether it's going to go ahead with the recommendations of Parliament or not. So in this case, it's still the initial stages in which, according to what the JSC conduct committee is saying that, well, maybe there's something that we need to listen to. Maybe it's a time in which we should open up the tribunal and let's hear what it is which is going to be said, which transpired at the time. Also keeping in mind that once a judge will remain a judge up until they've been impeached, and there's a certain conduct in which they need to adhere to. And if it seems as if that particular conduct has been broken, then the consequences will have to follow.
Thank you for painting that picture and providing that context, because I'm trying to understand in, behavior constituting bias. I mean, Mogoeng then has said this week that his meeting with Goliath was not conducted in secrecy. In fact, it was part of his regular duties as a judicial leader, characterized by his strong commitment to integrity. And so in lieu of that retaliation, I mean, would it be difficult to establish if the meeting was conducted in secrecy? Talk to us about that vantage point as well.
I think if you hear what the former Chief Justice is saying, what would almost come to a conclusion to say it was one of those meetings in which it was a regular one. So unless you have intrinsic information and evidence that you're going to provide, only then you can allege that from that meeting there was a decision that was taken that a complaint should be filed against him for whatever vendetta that would have been. So I think that's the difficulty which is going to be faced when you go into the actual tribunal. And in fact, the two cases for the two parties are going to be the following. Pro Judge Lope is going to say, you held a meeting on this day. After that particular meeting, then there was a complaint which was filed against me that I believe is frivolous. But you need the person who was a complainer who's not going to say, yes, that complaint was a credible one, or that complaint was, I was forced in order to file it for other ulterior motives. On the former justice side, he's going to come back and say, I was the head of the judiciary. I meet with judicial heads every single time. I meet with judges every single time. They report to me at the end of the day. So what I was doing was simply executing my duties and nothing more and nothing less. Nothing should be read from what has been stated from that meeting. And anyways, the part of communicating with them on a regular basis is something that falls within my job description. I'm not barred from doing that. So if you're going to come to a conclusion that there was something sinister which was happening, you need to provide interesting information and evidence that needs to be there. But I think from the side of the JSC or the conduct tribunal, they may be saying, we want to exonerate all the judges or the parties that are here. Whoever that alleges must bring proof, and then we'll take it from there.
I mean, Hlophe himself faced an investigation of gross misconduct regarding, allegations towards him and a fellow judge, and swore, perhaps even having sworn at Judge Goliath as well. I wonder, given, what transpired on that front, given that he is the complainant as well in its totality, what bias comes through on that front in terms of the allegations that have been lodged?
Well, there are two ways of looking at it. One could be simply stating that whatever allegations are there, we are going to deal with it the best way we know how. And there's a laid out procedure that should be there. I think the flow and the procedure is a matter of time in which it takes. For example, with Judge Lope, it took almost a decade in order for his matter to be finalized before it came to a final conclusion of saying that he must be impeached. Now, one wonders, when we start this one, how long is it going to take? What are the finances which are going to be there? Is it going to hamper the working of sitting judges? Is it going to hamper the work of the JSC or the Conduct Tribunal? Is one of the things that should be looked at. But then again, it all lies for who is the complainant and whether the complainant feels that there is information that needs to be brought out to the public and that should be acted upon, or there are any transgressions that have taken place in terms of the JSC and the code of conduct of the judges. That is what is going to be investigated by this tribunal.
And so without, insinuating anything, but perhaps we could look at possibilities and probabilities as well. Mogoeng has denied the allegations made by Hlophe, saying that he did not produce any evidence to support the allegations. But, I mean, the fact that the JSC is calling for an impeachment inquiry, does it mean that there's enough of a probability that has been created by Hlophe? I'm only asking this because it's to your earlier point about whether that complaint can be substantiated. How lengthy is this process also going to be? What does this also mean on the judiciary at large?
I think from the side of the JSC, they're saying we cannot wish away certain complaints just because we do not believe them. If there's certain evidence that is there, which is more or less credible, I'm almost likening it to a criminal case. There's prima facie evidence that something or transgression has taken place. The only thing that we can do is to open up a space so that those that are complaining come to the fore and provide evidence. Those that are defending themselves will also provide evidence, and an independent arbitrator or someone who's going to take a decision then comes in and say, this is my decision based on the evidence that has been provided to me. So from the side of the JSC, yes, they would have a discretion of whether to entertain the complaint or not, but the discretion is only limited to whether is there a complaint, is it credible, whether it is true or not. That is something which is going to be decided upon a later stage. It does cast a bit of aspersions, though, in the manner in which our judiciary is working, because you would assume that the two individuals that are at the nub of what is happening were working with each other. Even the former Chief Justice was the one that they were reporting to. Now, the question would be, before it even got to this particular point, were there any strange relations that were there? The straining relations that were there, how did they hamper the administrative of justice? Are there any cases that were supposed to be heard that were not heard? Are there any delays that were made in those particular cases? And when it comes to the administration of the courts, was there anything that hampered it? Before we got on to the last leg of saying that it takes a very long time for these type of tribunals to start and end. Who's going to bear the cost? We know that in the previous occasion when Judge Slope was there, or the former Judge Slope was there was an issue with regards to cost of the people that are going to represent him. Are we also going to see the same thing with the former Chief Justice? Are there also going to be delays in which the former Chief Justice will say, I need funds in order to cover my legal fees? All those things should be thought about and should be discussed and brought out to the fore, because they have a potential of stalling this whole process.
And so on the back of that, if the inquiry does see the light of day, the makeup of the inquiry, the complaint being investigated by the tribunal, does that have any significance as well?
Yes, it does on two fronts. Firstly, it then says in our sort of a framework and the judiciary that we have, there's no one who's above the law. Everyone is subject to scrutiny. Even if you're the former Chief Justice, you need the same rules which apply to any judge will apply to you. But on the second part of it is then to say you then need to form a three-member panel with someone who's going to be the presiding officer or the ultimate accounting individual when it comes to taking those decisions. You need someone who's going to be the initiator, and of course they'll be on the side of the defense from the former Chief Justice, his team again, to say how we're going to do this process. My worry again would be the amount of time and the cost which is going to be associated with it, and the nature of the complaint, because it's quite complex. It's a he said, they said type of things. So there's a lot of evidence which is going to need to be provided and presented to the tribunal.
Yeah, no, there are more questions than answers at this point, but perhaps also what this does for the judiciary at large. We were monitoring closely. Mpumelelo, thank you for your time, for unpacking this. We'll leave the conversation there for now. Legal expert Mpumelelo Zigalala weighing in. We know the Judicial Service Commission's Conduct Committee have recommended that former Chief Justice Mogoeng face a possible impeachment inquiry. Mpumelelo just weighing in on some of the facts and figures associated, providing context and really where to from here. In relation to that as it unfolds. But we'll leave that conversation then, be right back after this. Don't go anywhere. Let's continue now with the Weekend Review, a webinar, in fact, hosted by the University of KwaZulu-Natal to observe the United Nations World Cities Day. Was heard of the increasing health, or rather has heard of the increasing health and mental health risks of global warming and climate change on the populations of fast-growing cities. But international academics and researchers also discuss solutions such as the positive impact of green spaces and just how women and the youth need to be at the forefront of urban climate change initiatives. Let's take a look.
The United Nations estimates that by 2030, every 6 out of 10 people in the world will live in urban areas, and of those, every 6 out of 10 will be under the age of 18. Researchers say cities are responsible for 75% of greenhouse gas emissions through its energy use, and it needs to develop urban climate action plans, which should be led by the youth, who supports new innovations and is exposed to digital transformation.
Blue-green growth strategies are emerging concept that really resonates with the youth who are open to novelty and new innovation. So if you look at an action like implementing blue and green rules. These are new innovations that are coming. The youth will also want to engage in urban gardens, permeable pavings, urban afforestation, climate smart agriculture, green entrepreneurship, circular economy, and all of that.
Researchers say rapid urbanization puts extra pressure on infrastructure and its ability to counter climate impact, such as floods and extreme heat. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned that under all climate scenarios, above the 1.5 degrees Celsius average global surface temperature, there is a high risk of people dying from heat in many African cities. Research in Lagos, Nigeria, has shown the link between disease and extreme temperatures.
Within 0 to 5 days of exposure to extremely high temperatures above that minimum risk temperature, there's tendency for an increase in the risk, increase in the frequency of emergency admissions in hospitals for cardiovascular diseases. Similarly, if temperatures are extremely cold beyond that range in which the human body can adjust, we have increased risk for cardiovascular emergencies.
Research shows that one of the solutions lies in urban green spaces. There's evidence that urban green spaces play a vital role in reducing mental health issues as well as heat-related deaths. Green trees, experts say, reduce the impact of heat and also combat pollution and noise.
So it's not just about providing green places and spaces. They have to be good places, biodiverse places, robust, resilient places that can help buffer the impacts of climate change and provide places that are resilient, sustainable, for people, and importantly, equitable, that these health benefits that we receive from urban green and blue spaces, that they are provided for everybody.
Knight also emphasised the key role of women in climate change action, as research shows that more than 60% of urban farmers are women. And she says there's evidence that by involving women in decision-making, there tends to be better environmental outcomes for all. Renee Heine, SABC News, Durban.
While residents of Swartrugens and Vulindlela in the northwest are facing a severe water crisis after the Swartrugens Dam, their main water supply ran dry. Now, with taps empty, residents say that they're struggling to perform basic tasks at home. The severe shortage has sent us desperate families scrambling to secure even small amounts of water by whatever means necessary. Residents are blaming government for not anticipating the situation.
From dawn till dusk, scenes of long queues have become common in town as residents line up with any container they can find, handing them to bucket drivers who collect water from local borehole owners.
The water shortage in Vulindlela has severely impacted many lives. Children need to go to school, yet there is no water available. We have to wake up as early as 5 a.m. just to get water. But the trucks don't arrive on time, they only come around 7 p.m.
We are facing a water crisis. We don't have access to water, and it's a constant struggle. We can't wash even though we have sick family members who need daily bathing, and we need to keep our homes clean. But it is impossible because of this water shortage.
I wish the municipality will support us by at least providing water trucks to help.
You know, it's sad to see the situation in this time, you know what I mean? Municipality, to be honest, municipality hasn't made any I don't think they made good enough efforts to supply the locals, the locals with water. It's just sad, yeah.
And the blame, some say, should be laid squarely at the feet of the Department of Water Affairs.
I think we must ask the Department of Water Affairs, because they are the custodians of water. Where are they? Because they are supposed to give us water, and they don't give us water. And the Department of Water Affairs must explain to us as a community.
The Department of Water Affairs did not respond to requests for comment. Catlin River Local Municipality, meanwhile, say Efforts are underway to address the situation.
We've been engaging the different sectors to ensure that we attend to that problem. One of the main problems is that most of our structure is vandalized, so we are looking to ensure that we resuscitate those that are vandalized and ensure that we deliver water to our people, whether through boreholes. But in a short-term period, we really need to get those boreholes up and running so that people must get water.
Community hopes that more effective measures will be implemented soon to alleviate strain on the water resources and further crisis developing. Solfelo Mogami, SABC News, Swatragens.
Let's continue now. President Ramaphosa has congratulated Botswana's President-elect Duma Boko. We obviously seen President Ramaphosa has commended the Umbrella for Democratic Change coalition on its success in the election. He's also welcomed outgoing President Mokgweetsi Masisi's stated preparations for transition that follows 58 years of governance by the Botswana Democratic Party. President Ramaphosa says that the success of the election in Botswana is an important and affirming demonstration of democratic maturity in the region and the African continent. So for more of this, let's bring in our senior reporter, Kailihle Khumalo once again. Kaya, welcome back. But on a different note, the Botswanas have spoken. The rejection of the Botswana Democratic Party, rejecting the current president, Masisi. Talk to us about the dynamics unfolding. Why? Why did this happen?
Well, absolutely, Liesl. Such a very seismic shift in Botswana with the results really just coming from Gaborone, really just pointing to a number of issues really that have been confronting the country. For example, when you hear from the young Botswana, they talk about the issues pertaining to unemployment, but also the issues really just about the frustration with the BDP's long rule. I mean, this is a country that has always been hailed as a stable democracy in the African continent. You go back to the 60s when they had independence from Britain, and there has been a lot of promises being made, but also a very seamless transition really from the outgoing President Masisi to now the UDC leader Duma Boko, really just pointing to the issue around the economy as well. A lot of issues have been raised in his manifesto, where he's made a litany of promises in terms of diversifying Botswana's economy. As you know, that in terms of the economy, really, there has been this over-reliance on the diamond as a source of income. But also Mr. Bogo is talking about the issues around tapping into tourism as well as one of the key sectors in terms of really just ushering in the transformation in Botswana. But by all accounts, really, Liesl, speaking to a number of challenges that are facing the parties that are predominantly known as the former liberation movements. I mean, right here in South Africa, for example, we saw with the May election where quite a massive developments happened here, where the ANC lost its majority, but also very interesting times where the outgoing president Masisi has really made an undertaking to make sure that there is a smooth transition in terms of making sure that the president-elect is able to work effectively in fixing all the challenges that are facing Botswana.
Succinctly summarized there. Thank you, Kaya, for that, because President Masisi, in fact, has reportedly said he accepts the outcome of the elections, doesn't want any conspiracies. What do you read into that? But let me also bring former President Ian Khama into the works. Where does he fit into all of this in terms of grassroots connections and the dynamics that have played out this time around?
Well, absolutely. So one of the key questions that really emerged yesterday when the outgoing President Masisi was really speaking to the members of the media was around the feud with the former president of Botswana. We know that at some point, former President Khama was on a self-imposed exile here in South Africa. So the outgoing President Masisi says, look, he doesn't regret anything. But also really speaking about this long-standing issue that has really just been like an albatross around Botswana's neck, given all the challenges that have really just arose in light of this. And there was a very clear undertaking by former President Khama that as he went back to Botswana, he's going to make sure that President Masisi really loses the election, and definitely that has been the case. But also from the SADC region and other parts of the world, Liesel, it's really just been interesting to gauge the reaction. I mean, from the neighboring country of Zambia, where President Hakainde Hichilema has really just been quite receptive and really welcoming to these results, looking forward to working with the President-elect of Botswana right here in South Africa. We do understand as well that President Ramaphosa, in fact, had also a telephonic exchange with the President-elect of Botswana, really just speaking to this really friendly just neighborhoodness, as it were, in terms of these countries, but also with the SADC head of the security and defense and political cooperation, and the Tanzanian President Suluhu Hassan, also really saying that this is a very important moment for the people of Botswana, really speaking out about the peaceful election, but also the endorsement from the observer missions, who said, albeit with the numerous challenges that have just been faced by these elections, but notwithstanding that, these are elections that have just been widely accepted by a number of observer missions, of course with a number of challenges when it comes to the logistics, but a very interesting time as well for the people of Botswana as they wait for the UDC's administration. Obviously quite a number of challenges facing the new administration, Liesel. We just heard from a short while ago from the ANC's head of international relations, Nomvula Mokonyane, saying that they welcome these results, obviously reflecting the will of the people of Botswana.
So Kaya, let's get into that because obviously outgoing President Masisi having served one term. And so with President-elect Duma Boko, talk to us about, you know, his message, his appeal to the nation, what he's bringing to the Botswanas, to the nation as well, some of those issues that he'll be tackling as he takes up the presidency.
Well, undoubtedly, Liesel, it's just economy in terms of making sure that especially the young people who have been bearing the brunt of unemployment and numerous challenges, I think there's a very unwavering support in terms of fixing those issues that are confronting the country, but also just in terms of diversifying the economy of Botswana. And also, I think there's a sense of gratitude because given the political earthquake that we've seen in Botswana, I think there was a sense of really just astonishment with these results, because they were not expecting such a victory, a landslide victory for that matter. But also it's been really interesting as well, the reactions from other parts of the world where the outgoing President Masisi has just been really just been lauded for making sure that we see this transition in Botswana, but also especially, Liesel, when you look at the African continent, where really when it comes to other countries, really there's always this resistance. You would have the post-election violence, but it's been fairly calm in Gaborone. We've seen the euphoric scenes where the supporters of UDC and many people really are just saying this is such a pivotal moment for Botswana in terms of their transition. This is a country also that has always been seen as a shining example and very exemplary when it comes to democracy. But by all accounts, quite a number of challenges will face the new administration in terms of tackling all these challenges. But also, we know that we're still keenly waiting for that moment in terms of the details around the inauguration, in terms of the leaders who will attend. But by all accounts, we know that Botswana is a very interesting and a very important partner to South Africa when it comes to trade. This is a landlocked country in terms of the coast. They always rely from other countries in terms of the movement of goods, but also a very interesting country by all accounts. But also what has been really interesting as well from the opposition parties here in South Africa, Liesel, we saw from the EFF leader, Julius Malema, saying this is very interesting for Botswana, but also welcoming the move that the visa restrictions that have been imposed on him finally will be lifted. Really, this has been widely welcomed by the EFF.
Kaya, perhaps as we wrap up this conversation, because I know that there are still, many questions remaining as this process and transition occurs, looking at the BDP at large, Basisi's role as well. But what are the whisperings? What do we understand about his role carrying on with politics in the party itself? What can you unearth on that front?
Well, obviously, that was a very important question that Mr. Masisi had to face during the course of the media briefing, Liesl, where he said it's really up to the BDP, but you really stated in no uncertain terms that you won't be seeking re-election, but really just a very interesting time for Botswana's democracy. As you know, that BDP has been at the helm from the 60s, really just marking quite a very difficult time where really they've had quite a very incredible defeat where they've just been removed and taken away, but also really reflecting that sentiment where the voters really are saying they're utterly fatigued and they're really just yearning for that change. They want to see this country that's got less than 2 million people really just being one of the thriving economies and really just dealing with a number of challenges. Obviously, it's been a very interesting time in the SADC region, Liesl. We've seen the developments in Mozambique as well. We've seen the post-election violence where Frelimo, as much as it's got over 70%, but on the ground we've seen Mr. Mondlane leading those protests. They're calling for the stairway, but obviously there has been a great deal of concern where, for example, the African Union chairperson, Musafaki Mohammed, has been calling for calm in Maputo, especially because we know that in Mozambique, this is a country that has been facing a conflict at some point, and the outgoing president, Filipe Nyusi, has always been lauded for making sure that there is long-lasting peace, where we saw that peace agreement with Renamo. But now a very big question, Liesl, is now around Namibia. We know that later this month, Namibia will be having elections, and we know that the incumbent or the current leader, the interim leader of Namibia, Nangolo Mbumba, is not really seeking re-election, really, following that very unfortunate developments of the passing away in the office of President Gengob. He has been really just saying, look, they want Swapa to come back to power. But obviously it's up to the Namibians to decide on that all-important question.
Okay, Lihle, thank you for painting that picture, perhaps the dynamics unfolding in the SADC region at large. Really just shining a spotlight on the elections in Botswana. That outcome, of course, we know that President Ramaphosa now having congratulated Botswana's President-elect Duma Boko after he won in a landslide victory. So as we move further afield, perhaps looking at the U.S. elections that are also just days away, Vice President Kamala Harris made several stops in the battleground state of Wisconsin, really promising to provide financial relief to middle-class families and also urging voters and supporters to make a plan to vote. In Little Treat, Harris touted her middle-class tax cuts, her plan to also provide financial assistance for childcare and to have Medicare pick up the cost of elder care as well. Let's take a listen.
At the top of my list is bringing down the cost of living for you. That will be my focus every single day as president, including I will give a middle-class tax cut to over 100 million Americans. We will enact the first ever federal ban on corporate price gouging on groceries. And fight to make sure that hardworking Americans can actually afford a place to live.
Of course, you can stay tuned to SABC News for that coverage come election day in the USA. Closer to home, though, we've seen the South African Communist Party has called on government to prioritize the plight of the poor facing the high cost of living. The party embarked on what it calls a People's March to the National Treasury in Pretoria. The SACP was joined by its alliance partners, the ANC and COSATU, in delivering a memorandum of demands to the Finance Ministry, citing austerity measures, the high cost of food and unemployment amongst its concerns.
The SACP and some of its alliance partners have accused government of failing to address the triple challenge of poverty, inequality and unemployment. They occupied the streets of Tshwane in a march hot on the heels of this week's medium-term budget, with the hopes that much more could be done for the country's poor.
The crisis that they find themselves in, they can't afford basics, foodstuff, transport, housing, anything is too expensive in this country because of the capitalist system and because the government doesn't want to capacitate the public sector economy. Part of the content of the memorandum is to call for a stronger public sector economy that can support the living conditions of our people, so that we don't have an economy that benefits a minority that makes huge profit at the expense of the majority who live in misery perpetually.
The march was joined by some ANC members in government. They want urgent and resolute steps towards the tackling of the cost of living crisis, implementing the National Health Insurance and the rollout of the Bella Act in its entirety.
The message is simple. The clock is ticking. On the 14th of December, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act will kick in, and in January 2025, all our children will be equal in all our schools without exception. There is no one who will stop our children to go to any school of their choice. There will be no one that will use the language to stop our children to come to school. The clock is ticking. The 14th of December is the deadline, and on the 15th of December, the Basic Education Laws Act kicks in and will implement it in Gauteng. We are ready to implement it. We are ready to fund it. We are ready to ensure that the Bella Act is implemented. 2025.
COSATU is concerned about the workers. The Labour Federation is accusing the Government of National Unity of threatening the workers' gains and of further pushing workers into poverty.
Today, comrades, the Minister of Finance has announced that over 11 million are going to be retrenched in the public service through what is called voluntary severance package. They are saying they want to rejuvenate the public service. They want to bring people into the public service, or young people in the public service. We are saying to them, number one, their vacancy rate in the public service is very alarming. The Department of Home Affairs only have 7,000 out of 18,000 staff that is needed. Put young people there without retaining the ones that are already in the work.
Treasury officials received the memorandum of demands, vowing to act on it. Those that took part in the march want their demands accommodated in the February budget. The country has a youth unemployment crisis. The march has lamented the lack of opportunities.
I want this march to address that unemployment is a very big problem in our country. And when I look at this thing, even the government cannot fix it.
We need Treasury who ifokotse the living cost, ifokotse mo dijong, because of bagatella batho ba location that they know nothing about.
One thing that I want for a young person like us, they must give us a chance.
The SACP and its alliance partners have vowed to return to the Treasury on a rolling mass action, calling on the unity of workers and civil society in putting pressure on government to come up with measures against the high cost of living and to prioritize the creation of jobs. But others view the march as the ruling party marching against itself. SABC News in Pretoria.
That is it for today. Thank you very much for joining myself and the crew for the Week in Review.